You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, it's good to be back with you in this last week of August. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, sponsored for the third straight week by Evergreen Adventure Foods, for which, by the way, I'm extremely grateful. This week, we've got another guest suggested by a listener. Jonas Schrott sent me an instant message introducing me to Sally Brooks. There was absolutely no mention of any hiking on her part, so you can only imagine how pleased I was when it turned out that she had indeed hiked the Appalachian Trail. When I spoke with Sally, I'm always looking for an angle to bring the best story I can to you, and I spotted it pretty early on. I think you'll enjoy our conversation and you'll love her story. As you'll hear, the two of us tended to laugh quite a bit, so we both obviously enjoyed it. Sally will be on in a moment. After Sally, Bill Tickner, or Mr. President, comes to us from Connecticut, and funnily enough, we laughed a lot in that one as well. He's a very affable bloke and seems to enjoy sharing his hike with us. And then we've got Chapter 5 of Keith Foskett's book, Balancing on Blue. This week he's reached the Smokies, and for me that's where the trail makes you step up a gear. That's not to say that the earlier miles aren't tough, because they often are, but the Smoky Mountains, as much as anything, take you into a realm that you've kind of imagined all your life. It's romantic, it's tough, and for the AT, it's quite high. The feeling that you're moving on really hits you as you walk out of the Smokies into Devonport Gap, and you know that you've achieved something. But before all of that, there's this. Have you guys ever tried Evergreen Adventure Foods? No? Let me tell you about them. You may remember that Toast and Jammz were great guests on the show a few weeks back and shared their terrific hiking stories and how they came to start this business. They were sick of the amount of plastic they saw in the backcountry and decided to do something about it. All the while they were looking for great tasting nutritious meals. Well, their meals are not only packed with nutrients, but they are also packed in a fully compostable pouch. So no more plastic to litter up the outdoors. I've tried their chili mac and their bella pasta. Both were excellent. The meals are 100% plant-based, meat and dairy-free, loaded with real ingredients. What is not to love, eh? Oh, and one more thing. Every meal purchase helps give back to the trail organisations and public lands. Partnerships with the ACC, PCTA, Wildlife Conservation, the Arizona Trail Association, and Leave No Trace, with more to come. Check them out at evergreenadventurefoods.com. It's been great having Toast and Jammz as sponsors these past 3 weeks. Quite apart from having great products, they're doing their bit for hiking, which is particularly laudable when you're running a business. Thanks a lot, and if you want to hear a little more about them, they're Jester's guests on her podcast, Jester Section Hiker, on Saturday, September the 5th. All our podcasts are available at our new hikingradionetwork.com website. Come and check it out. So now, let's meet Sally Brooks, or not yet. So I had a message from a listener who introduced me to today's guest, and to be honest, I was a little bit blindsided. When I did my normal cyber stalking, it turned out that this lady was, or is, in fact, a comedian, a writer, and a podcaster, all of which is fantastic, of course, but this is a hiking show. So when we spoke to prepare for this, I was delighted to learn that, in fact, she's also a thru-hiker. This is Sally Brooks. Hi, Sally. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Well, I'm relieved, as I say, that it turns out you are actually a thru-hiker. And,
that was your first question. You were like, why am I talking to you? I was like, I don't know.
Because I could see absolutely nothing on your site that showed that you were a hiker, but, that you've got a great story. So, and all those things are true. And
yes.
I didn't make any of that up. And we're going to come back to those, obviously. But I really want to talk about your hiking story because it's got quite a little hook, hasn't it?
I think so.
Don't give it away yet, by the way. So you did the AT in 2003, but it wasn't your first long distance hike, was it? Tell us about the previous hiking experience.
No, I actually, 2 summers before no, that's not true. Sorry. 2 summers before I hiked the AT, my best friend and her sister we're like, we're going to do the long trail in Vermont. And I had I had no backpacking experience. I had never spent a night with a backpack. I'd never spent a night in the woods,
Not one.
other than just
Okay.
camping.
Impressive. Not one.
But I was up for the adventure. And so I did the long trail with them, which is, goes the state of Vermont. And when I finished, I said, I'm never doing this again. It's too hard. I hate it. I have blisters on my feet. I had a fun time with my friends, but I could see them, anytime. So, and then, but then of course, a year later, when my friend Aaron, who is my best friend who I hiked with, brought up doing the AT, I couldn't pass it up.
So what was it about the long trail that you didn't like that then made you want to go back and do it 2 years later, do an even longer one 2 years later?
Yeah, I think it's just that I am not a natural hiker. I'm not, I wasn't in amazing shape. It was hard. I felt like I was too slow. It was hard. I think that was it. I just wasn't used to it. And when we finished, I was like, I'm glad I did it. I saw beautiful places. I'm glad I got to be with my friends and have this experience. But I think I was so tired at the end that I was like, why would I do that? Why would I do this to myself again?
And 10 times as far as well. That's it.
Exactly. But of course, I mean, it's like childbirth, right? Like as soon as you're done.
I have no idea.
You know how childbirth is. As soon as you're done, you're already revising it in your head. And all you can remember are the laughs and the beauty and the great parts of it, and I think most of it was that I was at a point in my life where I really needed a change. I had graduated from college. I'd been working a couple years and I had a boyfriend who was great, very nice. I had a nice job that wasn't going anywhere. And I just was feeling very stuck in my life. Right. And this seemed like a thing that could snap me out of that. And whether I knew it or not, but I'm glad I said yes, because it did.
Isn't that strange that people... and I don't believe that people who go on the trail are necessarily damaged in some way,
right.
but because I've done it twice, so I didn't think I was particularly damaged. But I think we're probably looking for something that we may not know we're looking for sometimes, don't you?
I do. I mean, if you would have asked me before I did it why I was going, I would just say just for the adventure of it. And, when else am I going to get to go? I had this boyfriend I'd been with for a couple years and we were thinking about getting married at some point. And I just was like, this is my big adventure before my life really begins. I was going to go to law school and I thought now is the time. It's like now or never. And I would have never have said, I need something to put me on a different trajectory. But I did. I mean, in hindsight, I did. I really
did. Funny enough, we're jumping forward. I'm going to just mention this. On your list of things that you are, a lawyer isn't one of them, but you became one, didn't you?
Ooh, I did become one. I did. Yeah, I did. I became a lawyer. I worked for 3 years for a federal judge and realized that even with that cushy law job, it just wasn't for me. And I had started doing stand-up. Actually, before I hiked the trail, I did it a little bit.
Very similar, of course, to being a lawyer.
I mean, in that people are like, I would never want to do that for both things. But I started doing it just kind of as a hobby and it took a hold and it took over my life. And I've been doing it for about 10 years. I mean, not during the quarantine, but otherwise, otherwise.
So you were in a stage of life where you felt you were in a bit of a state of flux. And at the time, when you told your boyfriend you wanted to do this hike, what was his reaction to it? And what was the reaction of the rest of your family and your friends, knowing that you didn't really like it?
Right. I think my parents are very supportive people. They didn't understand it. They're not outdoorsy people. So they didn't really know what it was, but I think they were like, that's great. Go on an adventure, My boyfriend was understanding, but he didn't like it. He was nice. He was a nice guy and he was very supportive of it. But he was like, you can do like, go now, but then this is like it. Right. Wow. Kind of like, wow. That was, I think kind of, that may be just my perspective. I'm sure he has a different perspective on it, but I will say that he was supportive as well. He was very supportive along the hike, but
That must have given you some quite the great thing and the bad thing about hiking, I think, is it gives you so much time to think. And there are good things and bad things about that. That must have given you the opportunity to think about your mindset and think about, this is it, go now, and that'll be it, sort of thing. So is that what it did for you? Did you find that the hike, and obviously you didn't find this in your first hike, but did your second hike give you that time and that space to have some thoughts that perhaps you needed to have at the time?
100%. I think, also, I'm not sure how old your listeners are, but this was back in 2003, before smartphones, before MP3 players. Yeah. So, I was hiking with like a little Walkman. I sometimes would play a tape that I would carry, and I had a radio that only caught a signal maybe once a month. It was like very rare that we could even get a radio signal. So there was nothing to do but think. And I think I have said this before, that I didn't go out there and become a different person, but I think I went out there and rediscovered myself. Like I just let myself be.
Sure.
Just, you're so tired. There's so many like ups and downs that you have no energy to just not be 100% yourself. And I think that was like the biggest gift, that I was like, oh, I don't have to pretend for anyone. I'm not trying to be someone who I think I should be. I am just 100% being me. And who that is not who I was before. That just was, I kind of rediscovered like my values and my goals, and
I'm aware. I know that sort of thing. Yeah. And did you write a bunch of hiking gags as well for your stage show?
Did I? Oh, no.
I feel that I'm sure that must be a really untapped area, a gold mine for you.
It may be. I'll have to look into it. Yeah. I feel like most people are just like, you did what? Who?
So anyway, so you decided for some strange reason, not having enjoyed it that much, to go on this trip. And yes. you went with a girlfriend. How did that relationship develop once you were on the trail? Was she a long-standing girlfriend, or was she somebody who went with you on the long trail?
Yeah. So she, her name's Erin. She's been my best friend since I was 12. We're like sisters, and we knew we could hike together because we'd done the long trail, and it was great. We were really clear about, we're in this together. We're not expecting to hike together every day. Right. If at some point something happens and one of us needs to leave and the other one wants to stay, then like no hard feelings. Like that we're going to hike our own hike, but we're into this together. And it was really, we were a good match for each other, because she is very determined. Like she's now a doctor. She is like one of those people who's like full speed ahead. And I needed that to like kind of pull me along, especially in the beginning. Because I had horrible blisters. I was way out of shape. And
so you were back into hating it straight away then? I mean, you must have, those first couple of weeks for you must have been a nightmare, because you didn't enjoy it first time. And when you start early, there's this range of Appalachian Trail weather to cope with. And I seem to remember, I may be wrong here, I think 2003 was one of the wettest years on record, wasn't it?
It was, at that point, it was the wettest year on record.
Excellent.
Yeah. And it was, it was snow on the ground when we started. So we started February 23rd.
Wow.
And it was really hard. And I right away got blisters, which it sounds not a big deal, but on the back of my feet, and I was wet all the time and I could never get them to heal. But I remember about when I was in Hiawassee, Georgia, so that's about a weekend.
Yes.
I wrote in my journal and I said, I'm miserable every day. I'm not enjoying this. And I'm going to give myself a month. And if in a month, like I'm not going to think about quitting for a month, but if in a month I still want to quit, I will. And when that month came around, I was like, there's no way. I would never. It was like I had gotten stronger. We'd met nice people. The weather was a little better. We were used to it. And it really did take that, letting myself know that there was an out and saying like, I am making this choice to be out here. And by the time the month came around, I really was like, I'm finishing this. Like this is, yeah.
Funny enough, articulating that there is an out, I think tends to allow people to take that out normally. So I think your reaction to it is different to most people's.
Right.
Giving yourself an out makes it too easy to take an out, and I'd always prefer not to. And I'm wondering from what you've just said, and I'm just thinking out loud here, and I may be entirely wrong. You didn't go home because you didn't want to go home. Probably,
yeah. Yeah. Well, and I also was, I had a hiking partner, so I felt some of it was like, when you feel like you have to go somewhere, you're doing it for someone else. That felt like an obligation at some points. And then when I let myself free of that, like, no, you're not doing this for her. She will keep going. You're doing this for yourself.
Absolutely.
That was made it a very different thing for me. I think was more of a motivator. But you're right. I've also always been motivated by, let me finish. Let me do this big thing. Like I wanted to finish. I wanted the goal. I
Sure.
like having a, some kind of program to follow. So, I think that was also just doing it and knowing that I could finish it.
And climbing one mountain after the other always gives you another mountain to climb, doesn't it?
There's
something about those, I think they call them pointless ups and downs, which I don't think are pointless, but there's something about going to the top of a mountain, think, oh, that's fantastic. And you look ahead of you and you've got another 50 or 60 to go. And you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I've got to keep doing it. And it's like having that thing that's in front of you the whole time. And I love that part of it. I can see you're standing out there one day and you look out and you see 3 or 4 mountains ahead. You think, in a day or two's time, I'm going to be on top of that mountain over there. That's a wonderful feeling. And you talked about not having GPS and cell phones and MP3s and stuff like that. I think they did have flip phones back then, though, didn't they? Or you couldn't get a signal?
You couldn't get a signal.
Oh, right.
I started the trail with one just as like, because my hiking partner, Aaron, is diabetic. And so I had one. And so we were a little, just to be like, oh, let's be safe. But I never got a signal. So I actually, to shave weight about a month in, sent it back. So, we were pay phones. I don't know if you guys remember those. Those are things on the street that you would pick up and call someone.
Good Lord. In the UK, there are these red boxes. You walked into this box and you pick up this hugely heavy machine and dialed number. Oh, it's a nightmare. The whole process is a nightmare. Then
now
you've got
they're
money
just for photo ops.
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So were the logistics particularly difficult back then, or did you find yourself, because you didn't know an easier time, if you know what I mean, as far as hiking's concerned, did you find you coped okay with logistics, resupplies and stuff?
I think because the AT is so, you can get into a town from so many places. So we would do about 3 or 4 days of food just so that we weren't carrying so much weight. That was like generally what we tried to do. And then we'd go in and resupply and go back out. We didn't take a ton of 0 days, but we tried to do mail drops because Aaron had to get insulin. So we would, we were very scheduled because we knew we had to finish at a certain point. So we finished in like around 4.5 months. So, so we did, so we were like we knew where we were going to be for the most part and where we were going to stop. And then we would have to kind of stop there because she had to get insulin every so often. So, I think it was pretty easy in terms of logistics. The post office, those were easy. They were used to hikers. People were used to picking up hitchhikers. And as women, it was pretty easy to get a hitch. That was like the one advantage of being a woman on the trail is that we would sometimes when we were hiking with friends, they would like kind of hang in the back and we would be up front, like with our thumbs up, and they would stop. And all of a sudden these 3, smelly guys would come out like, oh man. Yeah.
And so with less people on the trail, were you concerned for your safety, especially, 2 young women on the trail? Were you quite relaxed about that the whole time?
No, we never thought about it. It's funny. Before we left, everybody was like, are you going to bring a gun? Are you going to bring pepper spray? And we were like, why? We grew up in a city. Like I was living in Chicago. Like neither of us even gave it a second thought, and it never felt unsafe.
Were there many other young women on the trail back then?
No. Not that we met, I think it was a pretty low percentage back then in general, but because we were so early, I think we only met like less than 5 other women.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Because that's definitely grown a lot. And I think they said the ATC was saying last year they expected 45% or 40% of the starters to be women, which is
That's amazing.
quite
I'm so happy to hear that.
And wonderful as well. I quite agree as well. And what was your gear like back then? Was it quite heavy? That was before the lightweight stuff, wasn't it?
It was like right at the beginning. Like I remember when we were at Trail Days, they were, I can't remember the name of the gear company. Maybe they were introducing the Z Pack. Do you remember those or the G Pack? Those really lightweight with just the
Well, Z Packs are the lightweight people now.
Yes. So that was like just the first prototype of that had come out. And I had gotten one that was like a really small company that was custom making lightweight. I think it was the beginning of the ultralight movement.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of ultralighters on the trail that we met. And we were pretty average because we had done the long trail. We knew, knew how to do our gear.
Yeah.
And so we were probably carrying like 30 pounds, 30 to 40, I think was about.
Still a lot though, isn't it? Still a lot these days, yeah.
Is still a lot. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
So that's interesting. I'd forgotten about that. Yes. So you'd already done the long trail, which you didn't enjoy, but But one thing about doing a hike, you learn the stuff that doesn't work quickly, don't you?
Yes.
And once it doesn't work, you just don't do that thing again, do you? You do something different. Did you find that experience actually informed your AT hike?
100%. I mean, yes, I think it was, that made the beginning, like we felt like we were starting the AT like, to a mile ahead of people we were starting with. Like the people we met at the beginning who were like, carrying axes and like shovels and whatever. And we were just like, oh, we had, we were like some of the first people to use those like soda can stoves. And
really?
We had, we used bleach for water filter, so we knew we knew things.
Yeah, cool.
Because also, there was no.
Bet you scared all the guys.
We knew how to make a fire. We were very cool.
Very cool, very cool. And then you mentioned earlier on that you went to Trail Days. And where were you in your hike did you go back to Trail There or go forward?
We did. We were right on the Pennsylvania, New Jersey border.
Oh,
we had just made it to that. There was a hostel there. Do you remember that? It was in a church. I don't know if it's still there, but
yes, there is. It still is. Yes.
Yeah. So we were there and we had actually slack packed a day ahead in New Jersey and then rented a car and drove back with a guy we were hiking with.
Why'd you go back?
That's
Aaron, a long way. That's a long way.
It is a long way. And it was, it's a little depressing when you get in a car and in 8 hours, you're like, oh, that's 3-4 months of my life.
Yes,
walking.
Exactly.
But it was Aaron, who I was hiking with, her sister had hiked a couple years earlier. And so she had gone and met her at Trail Days and she remembered it being so fun and everybody was talking about it. And so we just made it a priority to go. And her brother came and met us and I'm glad we went.
And this is your hook.
This is my hook.
You went back to Trail Days and you met somebody.
I did.
How did that happen, first off?
So when Aaron and I first started hiking, we were hiking with a guy named Mike. And we hiked with him for about a month. And then he stopped to do something and we kept going. And we had heard like a few weeks earlier before Trail Days that Mike was now hiking with this guy, Ben, and they were not that far behind us. And so I started writing in all of the trail registers. I started writing, hey, you guys, come meet us, like catch up to us. Come on, we're going to go to Trail Days. Like,
you hussy.
I know how
forward of you.
And I was like, saying I had heard that Ben was going to move to Chicago, which is where I had just moved from. And I heard that he had a girlfriend. And so I was like, hey, I hear you're going to move.
Hang on. You just glossed over that bit.
Yeah.
He also had a girlfriend, did he?
He had a girlfriend.
All right.
But they had broken up before we met. So I hadn't gotten the update. So I hadn't met him. I didn't know him. He was, this guy who was hiking with our friend Mike. So I just was like, for fun, writing in the registers. And I started saying like, hurry up and catch up. We have so much in common. We're going to be best friends. And then I started calling him best friend Ben. And then I started calling him BFB. And so I was writing in the registers. And then when we got to trail days, maybe minutes after we got there, we hear someone calling our name, and it's Mike. And he's with this guy, and it's Ben. And he says like, what's crazy is like, I got your messages, and those are actually my initials. BFB are my like, those are his initials in real life. And I was like, well, I guess it's fate. We're gonna have to be best friends. And then that was it. And then we
And was there an instant attraction?
There was an instant attraction. Yeah. He was, we were both young and hikery
and sort of singlish.
He was single. I was not yet. But
you left your cat with your boyfriend. You told me this.
I did,
which is a bit of a thing, apparently.
Is it? Yeah, I had been living with my boyfriend, and he had come out to visit once early on at Miss Janet's. I don't know if Miss Janet was still there when you
in Urban. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yep. And it had not gone great. It had been whatever. So we were kind of on the outs, but and then I met Ben. And we spent this like all of trail days together. He knew I had a boyfriend. My friend Aaron was like, "You better tell him. You better tell him you have a boyfriend." I was like, "He knows. He's just flirty."
He wouldn't have known, and probably wouldn't have cared that much, to be fair, at the time. So
probably not. But
so you had this instant attraction.
Yes,
but then you must have, I presume, gone your separate ways again straight after.
We did.
Trail days.
So it
you
turned
went forward
out
to where you'd stopped. And where had he stopped before then?
He was 18 miles behind us. So he was not that far behind us. They were just a day. But because they were hiking with Mike's little brother, and when people come to visit on the trail, they're slower. And so you can't hike as much. So it took them 3 more weeks to catch up with us after that. And that was.
Did you ever consider going back to the same spot, just 18 miles behind where you were, and just redoing that 18 miles and just hanging out together then?
No.
Well, please.
We don't slow down for anyone.
Don't look so shocked. Come on.
No, you know what is, it's interesting. Well, and we had met at trail days, but it really was just like we're hanging out. There was no, I would tell you. I would tell you now from my vantage point today.
Absolutely. So, but he eventually caught you. And where did that happen, you say?
That happened in Lee, Massachusetts.
Oh, right. So quite a way forward then. Mm-hmm. And so the two of you suddenly became a 3, or in fact, was it a 4 or?
It was actually, at that point, we were 5.
All right, fine.
So it was our friend, it was Pilgrim, our friend Mike, and Aaron, and Ben and I. That was right. So those were the 5, and then we had one more guy who we met up with or 2 more guys who we met up with, and ended up finishing the trail with.
So did that change the rhythm of your hike? Suddenly getting into a bigger trail? I hiked with a guy last year for the last 1,700 miles, and it was just the 2 of us. We were with other people as well, but mainly it was the 2 of us hiking together. Did you find with a bigger group who you're all generally hiking together, that changed the rhythm?
Yeah, it made it way more fun, I will say. We had a really fun group of people who were pretty like-minded. We're all still really good friends, and everybody had wanted to be finished early. So we all were like, we all had the same goal of like, we're hiking, we have to hike this much. We have to hike big days. We have to keep going forward.
Yeah, because you said 4.5 months. That is pretty darn fast, isn't it, really?
It is pretty, yeah, it's pretty fast. We took enough days off, but we still, we just wouldn't take a ton of zeros. We would, if we were in town, we would hike, however, 18 miles into town and then take a night off.
Right. Well, I've thought about, and I've since thought about this since we spoke about doing this interview before, that you're then approaching Katahdin, the guy with whom you have an attraction.
Yes.
And it must have filled both of you with a little bit of dread, I'd imagine, or had you already discussed about stuff? How did you feel about, as you're approaching Katahdin, what's going to happen?
So we had our first kiss in Manchester Center, Vermont.
Cool, you didn't hang about, did you?
And that was I had broken up with the boyfriend.
All right.
And he was very, very, we were very clear about that. So Manchester Center, we kissed, and that was kind of it. We were like, we're together. And about right as we got into Maine, he said to me, listen, what do you think about me moving to Cincinnati with you? And that's where I was going to law school. And I was like, wait, what? What are you talking about? He's like, listen, I think this is something that I want to see through. And, he wasn't
just talking the hike, was he?
No, he was like, I want to see if we can make something of this relationship, and let's try it. Why not? Like, what do we have to lose? And I was like, yeah, let's go. So so we knew that he was going to move to Cincinnati. Like, we were going to go back to Ohio together. And I think that I think for us, it did make it a little different than the people we were hiking with, because it's like it was ending, but we knew we had this whole new thing to look forward to. So, I think we were faring better than a lot of people we were hiking with who, you have those like really conflicting emotions of like, I want this to be over. I'm so ready to be done, but also I don't want this to end. And
I've talked about this a few times on the podcast before. It is almost brutal the way in which you touch the sign, and then you immediately get, apart from the 5 hours to get down, right. but you immediately have that separation, and it feels, oh no, don't go. You give somebody a hug or whatever, and they're gone. But you and Ben had decided you were okay. So for you, it must have been so much nicer than it would otherwise. It would have been terrible had you not had that discussion already, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, as a 23-year-old, I really credit him for being mature and being the one who was like vulnerable about it and was like, hey, I want to try to make this relationship work, because I was like I never changed my life for a man. I just was, and coming, just having been living with a guy, I think I felt a little, timid.
You're searching for the word here.
Yeah. I think I just was, I felt like, okay, maybe this is too much too soon. And I've only known this guy for 3 weeks. Should I really have him move to another state with me? And, but he was sure about it, and it made me feel confident too. And
did you kind of both go pretty much straight to Cincinnati, or how did that work out?
Yeah, actually. So his dad had hiked the first 3 days with him. And so then he came and hiked the last couple days.
Beautiful.
And it's so awesome. So his dad was there, and I actually went with them home to Delaware, which is where Ben is from, met his mom and his family. And then we went from there to Ohio, and went straight to like, this where my family is. And then, so we met the parents right
I'm back
away.
From hiking. Guess what I've got?
Guess what I got? Hey, remember how I left Florida and I had a boyfriend? Well, now I've got a new one, and he's moving in.
How cool is that? That is so cool. And I'm going to ask you something else in a minute, but so just to bring it full circle, as it were, 17 years later, what's the situation now?
We're still married, and we have a 4-year-old.
How lovely. How bloody lovely. Yeah, you didn't call the 4-year-old Katahdin, did you, or anything like that? or Manchester, Vermont.
We considered, No, his name's Max, after Max Patch.
Oh,
no, I'm just kidding.
Cool. That's tell him that's what it was, really.
Yeah.
So you've had a somewhat varied career, though, haven't you? Tell us about that. You became a lawyer.
I did. I became a lawyer, and while I was a lawyer, I was just doing stand-up as a hobby, and then it became more than a hobby, and so I started getting work as a stand-up, and Ben and I had moved he got a fellowship in Hungary, so we moved there for a year, and when we moved back from Hungary, we moved to West Virginia, which is where he's a professor, so that's where he got his first professor job. Right. And when we moved to West Virginia, I was just like, I'm not going back to being a lawyer. It was kind of like, I was like, I want to see if I can make a go at being a stand-up comedian. We're living in a place where, like, price of living is so cheap. Let's let me try it. And he was like, great. I think it's great. You should do it. And so I did. And then I started getting lots of work, and I was on the road for 45 weeks a year. I was traveling as a stand-up. And then we moved to New York City, and I started writing, freelance writing, so that I didn't have to travel as much because we had a baby.
Yeah, they slow you down a bit, don't they?
Yeah, it does. Just a little bit. But and now we live in Atlanta, which
wow, you are moving around. So did you ever want to put yourself through another hike, or were you, as in this case, two and done, because you did long travel, you did the AT. Did you ever think again? And the reason I ask this is I know that, and I don't know whether you've only been doing this during the pandemic. I know that recently it's taken you 17 years to write your book about the AT, hasn't it? And you haven't actually published it, or have you published it?
I have not published it. I have just finished a draft. I've just finished
So you've written it. So
I've written
what was it like for you to return to your hike? Because you can't just conjure this out of thin air, can you? You have to go back to a mindset, don't you? How was that for you?
It was, it's kind of intense, right?
Yeah.
Where and kind of intense to do that. But also
we've ruined the ending now, by the way.
I know. Well, there's other stuff that happens, guys. Yeah, and enjoyable. And I liked being back there. I think that's probably why somewhat why it took me so long, was that I just, I was doing lots of other things with my life, lots of other creative things that were fulfilling. But then also, it was nice to be back with my friends and, be 25 and be hiking and doing the AT. And so I really did, it felt like I was back there and getting to relive that. And so I made, I was like, I have to finish this. Yes, I have to do it. Like I'm starting to forget. I mean, I have journals, but I'm starting to forget. So, yeah, I finally, I've made we summited on July 15th, and I made the goal of finishing it before that.
Very nice.
So I did this year.
Nice.
Only 17 years later.
Are you pleased with it? And has it rekindled any desire to do any of it again, or you literally are done? You're not going to hike again?
No, I think we would both like to do another long hike. Like we would love to do. We did our honeymoon. We did the Jammz Trail.
Nice.
We would love to do another long trail. I think just when our life allows us, we will. But we do a lot of, we do a lot of hiking. We haven't done as much backpacking in a long time, but I would love to. I in a minute.
And you can tell Max Patch why he's named that.
Yeah.
Even better.
I met, when we were on the long trail, we met the most amazing women. There were these two sisters, and they had, between the two of them, they had 6 kids under 10.
Oh my
And they
gosh.
thru-hiked the long trail.
Oh my
Isn't that
gosh.
amazing?
That is, they had them with them.
They had them with them.
Oh my God, that's even worse. I mean, I thought you meant they left them at home. They'd actually take them with them. Oh,
no, that sounds amazing. But yeah, so we call them the Von Trapps.
Yes.
But yeah,
I met some Von Trapps.
They were cool. So it can be done.
Yeah, you know what? I think where there's a will. I mean, in everything, as with everything in life, if you want to do it enough, you'll do it, and you work out how to make it done. Look, I was nonplussed when I first heard you were coming on the show, and I didn't actually know why. But you're also now a podcaster as well, aren't you? So
I am a podcaster. Yes.
This is why you've actually got a microphone, the same as I. We've both got microphones, which is kind of nice. Do you enjoy that part of it as well, that medium?
I do. I love podcasting. My podcast is called Dumb Love. We do, we're 2 white ladies in our 40s, so we have to have something about true crime. So it's, we do true love stories and true crime stories. Nice. And it's fun. I do it with another comedian, and it's nice to have, it's been really, especially during the pandemic, it's been awesome.
It's an outlet, definitely.
Yeah, I love it. I was just looking for the right thing and the right partner to do it with, and I think I really found it. So,
cool.
Yeah, we're definitely enjoying it.
Very cool. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on and telling us your story. When we did speak about this, I was trying to work out the best way to tell your story, and I think you meeting your husband is definitely the hook. So I'm really glad we did. I'm really glad we did it this way. And I wasn't trying to embarrass anybody by saying what happened. I think it's a great story.
Thank you.
And the AT gives the opportunity for these stories to unfold. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I had such a great time.
Take it easy.
All right.
Cheers,
Thanks.
Ed.
You too.
Bye. Do you know what? I never found out from Sally why she was called Not Yet. I'll have to ask her. It was a great story though, wasn't it? It's kind of surprised me how quite a lot of people meet and get together on the trail. And as soon as she told me that in our pre-recording chat, I knew that was going to be our story. She's such a happy woman, and it really was a pleasure to chat with her. Before we move on to Mr. President, I want to share a story with you. It's actually about one of our donors to the show. So we'll start there. This week, I want to thank Anne Hinton, who sent a donation from the UK, two of our monthly donors, Mike DiCello and Michelle Brown, and a new monthly donor, Vicky Thomason. And we're going to come back to Vicky in a minute. Thanks to all of you for making my job that a little bit easier. I truly appreciate you all. Remember, you can join them by clicking on one of the many donate buttons on the new hikingradionetwork.com website. But Vicky Thomason sent me an accompanying email. Basically, she was telling me that she's around my age, a little younger actually, yet she didn't feel that she, and I'm using air quotes here, measured up in the real world of hiking long distances. She talked about having a bad foot that needed surgery, but she's still walking and working her way towards her goal of 5 miles a day. And she's read a lot of hiking books, even mine. Now you may think, what's he rambling on about? But I'm not rambling. There is a purpose to all of this. Vicky told me about an app that she uses called Walk the Distance. To be honest, I'd already been alerted to this by another listener, and I downloaded it. What it does is to link with your health app on your iPhone, and it's currently just on the iPhone, I think, at the moment. Then it follows your progress, as if you were walking the AT. It plots and shows where you are on a map. And this is a thing I hadn't discovered before. When you pass a shelter or somebody on the trail, it points them out to you with pictures. So you have this kind of virtual experience of being on the trail. To be frank, I initially dismissed it, but when I started looking into it, it really is rather cool. To that end, and I'm sorry I've gone on a bit, I have the inventor of the app, John Zacconi, on the show next week to tell you all about it. And the point of telling you this is to admit that I couldn't have been more wrong about the app. I'd kind of dismissed it, but it clearly means a lot to Vicky, and I'm sure many others who probably never get the chance to get on the trail. And John's app gives them that taste of the AT that they're all thirsting for. Now, let's hear from Bill Tickner or Mr. President. Well, we're back on with Bill. Mr. President, how are you, Mr. President?
I'm great, Blue. How are you?
Not too bad. And as I'm recording this the week of the Republican presidential Republican committee thingy, so it's appropriate I'm talking to Mr. President himself. And you tell me you've just made it into Connecticut. Is that right?
Yeah, I just crossed over the border. God, maybe a few miles ago, hour ago. Hiked up over Bear Mountain, which is the first peak you hit in Connecticut. It was a great reception to the state.
Yeah. Do you know what? I found Connecticut tougher than I'd remembered it first time. Now, I remember,
oh, don't tell me this, Blue. Don't tell me this.
It's tough. It's tougher than you think it is, I tell you. But it's good. It's lovely hiking as well. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't like Maine or New Hampshire, but it wasn't, but it wasn't, I seem to remember first time it was relatively easy, but the second time it was maybe because I'm 67 when I did it, 66 when I did it second time, but it seemed to be a lot tougher. But you said that this week has been all about the heat. Is it that bad up there?
Oh, Blue, there were a couple of days where it was close to 90, and I am not built for the heat. I slow down to probably a little over a mile an hour, even on relatively easy, terrain.
Wow.
But I was getting to the point where it was so hot that I was welcoming the thunderstorms in the afternoon.
Dear me. So, but I was speaking this evening to a friend of mine who's in Maine, said the cooler weather is on the way, so hopefully you're going to be okay. Has it slowed your progress down a lot, really?
Here's the thing. Vermont and Massachusetts are super easy states. They just are. Massachusetts, even Greylock was just really easy with all its beautiful switchbacks.
Yeah.
So I was able to make the miles I wanted to make by just slowing down in the afternoon, taking a longer lunch, and hiking into the evening hours or starting a little earlier at times.
Mm-hmm.
But the heat just sapped my energy. And I was walking past this family the other day, and they were cordial. We said hello, and as we're walking away, the little boy said to the father, "He sweats a lot." I was just pouring sweat, hiking up this mountain. Of course, they were going down, and I was going up. But still,
it's a funny thing to live with sweat, don't you think so? And I've not even thought about it before. You just mentioned the sweating, and I know that you'd often go 4 or 5 days, sometimes 6 days without a shower. It becomes a new way. It becomes a new way of being, though, doesn't it? And you kind of get used to it, don't you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't smell it, and
that's the worrying part. Yeah,
Yeah, and luckily, because I wear a handkerchief as a face mask when I need it, to have it just right there at all times.
Right.
And I use that to wipe my face when I get especially sweaty.
Sure.
But in the heat of the day, when it's really bad, I have one of those little tiny absorbing towels, and I have to pull that out because it can get a little excessive.
Yeah,
but
yeah. Have you had any bugs?
The bugs were way worse in Maine, and not too bad in New Hampshire. There's been a little resurgence of these almost like no-see-ums. Yeah. They're more annoying than anything else.
Yeah, they are annoying.
But oh God, they're the worst. And when you finally do, see it, it's too late. It's biting you.
There is a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason they're called no-see-ums, of course.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's going to get better as we go into the fall.
So apart from the heat, then, so how's the week been? What have you actually? How many miles have you done this week?
I did about 100 miles. And part of that was because I took a 0-day in Great Barrington. It's a town in western Massachusetts, southwestern Massachusetts.
Yep.
And it's the closest place for my parents to come visit me from Rhode Island.
Nice.
So they came out to visit me, and we went to a pub there, and I got a good steak, which is nice.
Yeah.
If the parents are there, you get the food you can't afford.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So we haven't actually talked about this. So what sort of stuff do you eat on the trail? Are you quite good at looking after yourself food wise, or is it something you do like the rest of us, just Snickers and terrible stuff?
I have a strategy. This being my third trail, I've kind of winnowed down to a strategy that works for me, and that's I do send myself. I buy Mountain House in bulk.
All right.
Because Mountain House really does have, I'm not going to promote Mountain House on the thing, but these meals that are made specifically for backpacking have a good amount of protein. They have a good amount of electrolytes and calories, and they taste good. And I know I'll eat them. So I send myself those in my resupply packages, and I also send myself honey stinger gels and energy chews.
Right.
Because they taste pretty good, and I can eat them really quickly while I'm walking. And I know myself. I learned this from my cycling, my long distance cycling, Blue.
Yeah.
You have to eat before you're hungry. And I know myself. If I don't eat before I'm hungry, then it's too late, and I'm going to start like feeling that as I'm hiking up hills and things like that. So I can grab these energy gels and energy chews really quickly, and before I need them, and
they're quite
I can get them down hunger. Yeah,
they're quite significant. I mean, they make a big difference. I tried a few out last year, and I remember thinking to myself, I should get some more of these. I kind of never did, but and they not so much. My ex-wife used to refer to it as blocking a hole up, in your stomach. You get stuff down you. But it's ease of eating as well as the other thing, is that you want something you can have quickly, and that's a pretty good thing to do. Yeah, pretty good thing to do. So what else?
It has to taste good and it has to be easy to eat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So what else has gone on this week?
Oh, the other thing, this is also part of that heat theme, is, I'm from California. That's where I live now.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a little cabin that I purchased after I hiked the PCT, because I wanted to kind of grow some roots in California.
Nice.
But my cabin is in the fire zone right now.
Oh, my gosh.
Up in Northern California. Yeah, so I get these text messages from Sonoma County, and I got a text message like 4 days ago that said your property is in the evacuation warning zone. So I called my renters that are renting it for the summer. I said, hey, just be careful. And then I got a text a couple days ago that said your cabin is now being evacuated. So
wow, that's slightly worrying.
Yeah.
So how far away is the fire from you then?
The fire is about 4 miles, maybe 5 miles from my cabin. But there's a lot in between the cabin and the fire. There's a river, there's some wineries. I always say if there's a winery between the fire and my house has got a better chance of surviving. But it's tough, to deal with this stuff while you're on the trail. So I have an agency that is looking after the cabin and giving me updates and helping take care of it, but it's a little stressful because I feel a little bit like my hands are tied.
Yeah, I was about to say, just for me, just keeping myself upright when I was on the trail was enough. To have the additional stress of knowing that there's a fire 4 miles from your place, wow, that's not nice at all. Are you enjoying this? Are you enjoying the AT right now?
I'm still loving it, even with all these factors that I have to deal with.
Interesting, because I was wondering that because the heat can get you anywhere, but the fact you've got that going on as well, it doesn't make you want to pack up and go back home and just check it's okay, or just I don't know what you could do, to be honest, when you got there. Could you? Couldn't do anything anyway, could you?
Yeah, this is what insurance is for. I mean, there's not much I can do if I went back to my cabin today. Besides turning on my sprinkler system, which I can actually do remotely,
nice.
There's nothing else I could really do,
Yeah.
So, and it's more. I'd be putting myself in danger if I went back to the cabin. If anyone went back to the cabin, but it's like one of those things the trail teaches you, right? Which is you look at what you can change and what you can't change. You look at what you can fix, what you can't fix, and you work with what you have. And right now, I can't do anything more by being in California than I could do here in my tent. So I might as well be in my tent.
You're absolutely right. And I know what we've mentioned this a few times on the show before. The great thing about hiking and backpacking on a long distance trail is that you have so few options. You either walk or you don't walk. And it's literally a binary choice. And so you make the choice. You make the choice to walk, and that's what you're doing. So where are you? So you're heading now. Yeah. I'm trying to. I still find it confusing speaking to somebody who's going south, by the way. And so, because I know that I observed when I was going down some of those mountains, particularly in Maine, actually more even than in New Hampshire, how precarious they seemed. Yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, "My gosh, this will be a nightmare to climb up." Are you making similar observations yourself for what northbound hikers are thinking?
Yeah, I always check the Gut Hook comments on things, and it's funny because you look at the elevation on the north side and the south side of each peak, and you think, oh man, I wish I was going northbound on this one. Yes. Like I was on Bear Mountain today, and going southbound, it's much steeper going up the north side of Bear Mountain, right. And the south side is really, really gentle, just like kind of on Musalaki back in New Hampshire.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. It's like an extreme example of that, where going southbound, the north side is super steep. You're like walking up a waterfall, but the south part of the mountain, if you're going north, going up the southbound side of the Musalaki, it's super gentle. So
you know what, it is. But both my through hikes, I actually deliberately went round and went from the north side because the thought of coming down by that waterfall would have been a nightmare for me. I found I really found going downhill to be much tougher in many ways than going uphill. I mean, it was exhausting and sweaty going uphill, but you get it out of the way, and once you're there, it's just a pretty gentle walk downhill all the way back to Glencliff and the Hikers Welcome Hostel, which is where I stayed for 2 consecutive nights, and it worked out for me that way. Yeah.
Well, and I always think too, because when I was in Maine, it didn't really matter which side of the mountain you were on; they were both difficult. That's how I felt about Maine.
There is
it came down to like, is it wet or is it not wet out here?
Yeah.
If it's wet and it's steep, it's a lot more dangerous. Especially going down, like you said.
Yeah.
And so, I look at that sort of thing. But I'm getting to the point now where my shoes, I have the same pair of shoes that I started with. They have 700 miles on them. At least, probably more than that. They weren't brand new when I put them on trail.
Wow.
And they have zero tread left.
Wow.
So I'm trying to push them until
you need some new ones, man. I tell you, what you say you need to eat before you get hungry. You need to change your shoes before they get dangerous.
I know. Well, I've slipped a couple times on them, so yeah. I'm getting that message loud and clear from the trail itself, and I'm trying to push them until I get closer to Pennsylvania, because everyone keeps telling me when I get to Pennsylvania, it's all rocks. So I want a good, fresh pair of shoes for that.
I tell you what, they are not. You know what? They're not lying at all.
Yeah.
But you'll enjoy it. I mean, this is another example. You're going to go southbound, coming out when you go down into Lehigh Gap. It's a boulder scramble, and I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. But going down that one, I wouldn't fancy that on a wet day either. So, it's funny actually. Just talking to you now and thinking about you doing the hike that I did last year, going the other way. It's just so it's a different experience, and which is why I love talking to people about the trail, because they just all have a different experience. So you got Connecticut now. I'm just trying to work backwards in my head now. So New York and then New Jersey. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and Connecticut's really short. I think I've got like 45 miles left of it already, and I just got to it.
Yeah, so, but then you get to Virginia, and then you stay in Virginia forever.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
Well, you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to have a lovely time. Enjoy your week, and I'm glad you're doing well. I hope your cabin's okay, and I hope the heat cools off a bit for you, because that kind of gets you to having heat all day long, doesn't it? Especially when you're top of a mountain. Yeah, it's so painful. Some of it.
It is. Yeah. It is. But this is why I like going south, because. And why it helps me to go a little slower, because then I'll go through some of the Mid-Atlantic states with maybe perhaps a little bit cooler weather than what I could have otherwise. I don't know.
You'll work it out.
So,
well, good to catch up with you, and we'll certainly chat soon. Okay.
Sounds good.
Take it easy. Bye.
You too. Bye.
He's a happy camper, isn't he? Mind you, having one of those giant fires only 4 miles from your cabin must be a bit stressful. But as you heard, he's very pragmatic about it. I hope by the time we speak next week, everything is okay. Just before we finish up with Fozzie and the Smokies, I wonder if you can help me out a bit. A couple of the Facebook sites I normally share my shows to have started taking down the show if it isn't entirely within their guidelines. I mean, for example, I posted one of Jester's shows about the Eastern Continental Trail on an AT page, and one of the admins took it down, despite the fact that the AT is part of the Eastern Continental Trail. What I'm asking is that if you, and I'm only asking this if you really enjoy a particular episode, don't do it all the time, because you're going to piss people off as much as I'm pissing them off. Please share it within your own network on Facebook. That way, more people will hear about our shows, and I will be less likely to piss off some petty little admin on one of the sites. Thanks so much. Now, Fozzie heads to the Smokies and experiences some of the disappointment of Clingman's Dome that I confess I had when I went. I'll see you next week. Chapter 5. The Smokies. April the 12th to April the 23rd, mile 153 to 309. I've met many Americans who admit being jealous of our European history and wished the US boasted a similar heritage. They love Europe's architecture, the old castles, cathedrals and other examples. Even further back we have wonderful reminders such as Stonehenge and Hadrian's Wall. I disagree because America does have an enviable past. Indigenous people lived in the US for thousands of years before settlers arrived. Much of their existence has vanished, but they made the history books. It wasn't until Christopher Columbus viewed America in 1492 and his subsequent trips that settlements appeared which we see today. Columbus's claim to be the first European to discover the US is debatable. Research now suggests that Bjarni Herjolfsson, a Viking sailor blown off course voyaging to Greenland around 985, sighted America. He didn't land but returned when the winds allowed. Herjolfsson described his trip to Leif Erikson, who set off in the year 1000 to see for himself. He landed on American soil, thought to be the first European to do so, 500 years before Columbus. He spent 3 winters there until 1002. Several more forays ensued until he established a base in 1009. Accompanied by 200 settlers and livestock, the initial amenable relations with the Native Americans collapsed, forcing their departure. In 1960, a discovery in North Newfoundland called Lancer Meadows could be Ericsson's first settlement. It shares similarities to Viking sites found in Greenland and Iceland. I'm sure there are more to discover. Despite North America's lack of ancient architecture compared to the rest of the world, it's fiercely proud of what it has. The AT has a wonderful sense of history and passes through many historical sites like those associated with the Civil War of 1861 to 1865. Harper's Ferry is a classic example, dotted with poignant buildings and reminders of the conflict. The Smoky Mountains is home to many structures. Remnants of bygone Appalachian communities and names of forgotten places still linger. In the middle of the woods, miles from anywhere, I passed old stonework, a ruined building or wall once serving as a livestock enclosure. They reflected wonderful stories, sparking my curiosity. Much has disappeared, but their names serve as lasting reminders. Near to Slaughter Creek is Blood Mountain, possibly named after a bloody battle between Cherokee and Creek Indians. Others believe the red-coloured lichen growing around the summit is responsible. Recent history has left its mark too. Charlie Connor, hiking with his friend Horace Kephart, rested on a rocky outcrop known as Fodderstack. Connor removed one of his boots and discovered a bunion which shared similarities to Fodderstack's outline. Kephart declared he'd get the place on a government map, and it's now called Charlie's Bunion. Lost Spectacles Gap, approaching the 700-mile mark in Virginia, is named after Tom Campbell, a Roanoke Appalachian Trail Club member who misplaced his glasses there whilst working. Even the past few years have boded well for future history. I followed writers who'd trodden the same path. Earl Schaefer, David Brill, and David Awol Miller, to name a few. I wondered if, in 100 or 1,000 years' time, we'd remember these inspirations, their names preserved for eternity with the trail. Those legends had thru-hiked here, and I'd devoured their words years before when I'd first heard of the AT. All the visualizations they'd gifted me, their thoughts, observations and feelings stayed as images. But now they unfolded. I shared their experiences, thoughts and emotions. I knew what Miller meant when he described his boots brushing against his calves, caking them with dirt. I understood Schaefer's observation of the mist, dense and muggy in the low spots, shifting and swirling elsewhere. I sympathised with Brill's struggling emotions as he bade farewell to his injured friend. The friends I'd met on the Pacific Crest Trail 2 years earlier inspired me too. Dinosaur, Pockets, Grey Fox, Texas Walker Ranger, Swiss Miss and others had shared their AT memories, painting their pictures and guiding me. I'd encountered those experiences such as the ruined homestead where Pockets had collected water from a well. He'd expressed his unease with the place, and unwelcome presence lurked. I'd experienced the intolerable point before rain turned to snow and chilled me to the core, as Swiss Miss had recounted. Dinosaur imparted the planning and physical strength required for trail maintenance crews to move a boulder. Or Grey Fox's delight as he described cresting a hill in Maine to see Katahdin for the first time. I cherished those observations, passed on by friends, tales from many years ago. They pulled me onwards, the anticipation building. The history, stories, legends and myths from Leif Erikson to haunted homesteads nestled in my mind's crevices. Now they unfolded. And what of my memories? I viewed the trail from 3 perspectives, the past, present and future. The past had gone, from Springer Mountain to where I'd taken my last step. The present I observed as my foot fell on the precise part of the ground between tree roots as planned, and the future was the next step, invisible but unknown, all the way to Maine. Many vivid memories, happy and sad. As Grey Fox had shared his vision of Katahdin, as Schaefer had watched the fog, I'd reminisce and pass on. I hoped my passions spurred others to experience this trail. And what of my words? As you read them, what do you picture? I hope you take them, tuck them away, and later place your foot between those same roots on your journey to Katahdin. At 3,800 feet, I passed Brown Fork Gap Shelter, the trail switching from the chilly west side, where the sun hadn't made inroads, to the warmer east. Ice mirrored the trail, creaking and cracking beneath me. The east side warmed as sunlight slid through the woods. I'd slept wearing most of my clothing during a bitter night. My down bag wasn't performing, and on closer inspection, the filling had migrated underneath. On Daffy's advice, I spent an hour easing the insulation on top. The fact I'd run out of coffee didn't help until the ever-amenable Eastwood jump-started my system by brewing me a mug. I collected water at Cody Gap, climbed the 800 feet from Cable Gap Shelter, and let gravity ease me down the 2,000-foot descent to NC-28. A mile later, I pulled into the Fontana Dam shelter, known as the Fontana Hilton. With an impressive capacity of 20, plus nearby toilets and a shower, the Hilton deserved its reputation, but it brimmed with early arrivals. Undecided whether to stay with the crowds, hunger decided for me. I called a 2-mile ride to the Fontana General Store to buy food for the Smokies. The pit stop restaurant served a generous portion of nachos before I returned to the Hilton. Hiker numbers had increased further, and hastily retreating I showered before bumping into Philip, who shared similar concerns. He'd scouted and found an island near the dam. It looked perfect for stealth camping, so crossing the shallows we settled and slept. The Smokies are a renowned section of the AT. Named after the natural fog that hangs over the range, they command views of the Tennessee and North Carolina border and boast the highest point of the entire trail, Clingman's Dome, at 6,643 feet. Designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, they contain 187,000 acres of old-growth forest and the densest black bear population in Eastern America. Frankly, I was shitting myself. I pondered this statistic and decided whether it was positive or negative. Eager to start the experience, I left at 7 a.m, albeit an hour after Philip, now fond of his early departures. I walked over Fontana Dam and ascended. Despite the usual trail undulations, the climbing continued to Clingman's Dome at 4,779 feet ascent, stretching over 33 miles. I crossed into my third state, Tennessee, from North Carolina, at mile 174. Even with the cooler air, spring had sprung in the Smokies. When I saw my first blossoming sarvice tree, cloaked in tiny white flowers, I thought it had snowed. The rhododendron bushes readied themselves, poised to unleash purple, white or pink blooms. Laurel bushes waited in anticipation. I peered back at the Fontana Reservoir, already a tiny speck lost in the surrounding furrows and folds. Regular gaps afforded welcome, far-reaching views, and the Smokies enjoyed an ideal sweet spot of woods and vistas. I felt at ease with my world, accustomed to the AT's whims and habits. The trail rarely routed around hills, but climbed over. A flat 3-mile section took most hikers an hour to complete. With the ascents, that often increased dramatically. My natural hiking speed is 3 miles an hour, but on strenuous sections it slumped as low as 2. Those who'd completed the AT warned against complacency. Just because you have a few thousand miles under your belt and the PCT, don't consider the AT as easy bagging, Pockets had cautioned. I now understood what he meant. Statistics for the AT's elevation gain aren't definitive, but it's around 464,500 feet. By comparison, Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in Britain, is 4,409 feet, meaning you'd have to summit 105 times to achieve the same elevation increase. If you thought Everest a tough prospect, when a thru-hiker finishes, they'll have climbed it 16 times. Statistics claim the AT's altitude gain even exceeds the Continental Divide Trail. My legs weakened at the prospect. Many hikers, after the initial trail romance subsides, became frustrated by the AT, especially the pointless ups and downs, or PUDs. I joked that during the AT's construction they chose the hardest route possible. The trail often climbed over obstacles instead of skirting them. I'd done my research and knew what to expect, but it annoyed me sometimes when the elevation graph showed a 1,000-foot climb at day's end. The AT is shorter than the PCT by around 462 miles. However, even after 2 weeks in a less demanding section, I already considered the AT tougher. "Do you snore?" inquired Bridget as she squeezed between me and PJ in Spencefield shelter. We expected heavy rain, so it was full. I laughed at the question. "Sometimes when I'm on my back, but with others I sleep on my side." As it transpired, she snored, an accusation she denied in the morning, despite both PJ and Beacon backing me up. A news flash reported Eric had changed his name to Bowser. Bridget had misjudged lowering her bear bag, which dropped on her head. Philip had little food, so made the best of an empty tortilla for breakfast. I had snacks, but my stove alcohol was non-existent. Alarmed at starting the day with no coffee, Beacon chipped in with a brew after seeing my onset of mild panic. Daffy had been missing for days, although Philip thought he was 50 miles behind with another group. Daffy likes to change those he socialises with, he explained. Running out of supplies was common, but rarely proved a problem. More a wonderful lesson in camaraderie. If someone ran out of oats, lacked a dinner, didn't have any sugar, or mulled over an empty gas canister, help was available. Without asking, we could count on someone's kindness to plug the deficit. In true outdoor spirit, we trusted karma. After a 16-mile uphill slog, I arrived at Clingman's Dome and sat with PJ, Philip and Bowser. I didn't know what to expect from the trail's highest point, but I was disappointed. As is common with our infatuation towards high places, they celebrated the roof of the AT by cutting a swathe through the trees. A road completed the carnage along with an obscene structure. Clingman's Dome Tower, built in 1959, was once a praised example of modern architecture. Now it resembled a concrete spiral vehicle ramp, often found on the side of multi-storey car parks. Half a mile away, tourist hordes on their annual vacation parked, kidded themselves with Walmart hiking accessories and ice creams, and plodded, breathless, to this monstrosity. All to claim they stood on the ugliest structure in the eastern US and the highest point in Tennessee. Kids wailed, adults searched for a McDonald's, others posed, panting for photos. Dehydrated holidaymakers littered the area. Some requested we photograph them, so I reverted to picking imaginary debris from my beard, whilst Philip and PJ removed their shoes as a deterrent. A Japanese man approached cautiously, treating us like hungry, agitated, filthy wild animals who'd emerged from the woods after 2 weeks. His observation bore some credit. He hesitantly handed me his camera. "You make picture, please?" I wiped my nose on my left sock and took his Nikon whilst he walked to the tower. This I found puzzling and hilarious, though I remained polite. Instead of climbing the ramp to take in the view and a better photo, he stood at the bottom to include the tower. I looked at Philip, confused. Why walk here and not see the top? And why have that hideous thing in the shot? What the f***? PJ and Bowser shrugged their shoulders. We relaxed until early evening as the last of the tourists disappeared. Philip proposed we sleep on the tower. This didn't excite anyone's wild camping instincts, but it was original and we could get into trouble. So, like naughty kids, we agreed. Clingman's afforded impressive views and we spent an hour taking them in. The wind increased at sunset and coldness descended. Exposed, though under the overhanging roof, we expected a chilly night. A wall circled the observation platform which shielded us as we hunkered next to it. I moved more insulation to the top of my bag before my life preservation instincts kicked in and I pulled on more clothing. I abandoned my bag revival before Philip suggested an obvious solution. Fozzie, turn it over. Newfound Gap, where the AT intersects US 41, is renowned for trail magic. Parking provides ample space for vehicles coming from Gatlinburg, a sizable town 15 miles away. Locals offered welcome sustenance and transport. My mattress had sprung a leak. At 3:30 a.m. on Clingman's Dome, a hissing sound near my right ear woke me as my comfortable perch thinned to an airless strip of plastic. The air chambers had deteriorated, so I got a ride to Gatlinburg for a replacement and to buy food. Long trails lift a hiker's expectations of the world with magnificent views and clean air. Arriving in town, our hopes continue with dreams of old, quiet, historical settlements, rich in history where we can resupply and take it in over a civilized meal. As if I'd written these wishes, Gatlinburg glanced nonchalantly and smirked rudely before scrunching them into a tight ball and tossing them to the ground. For good measure, it set them alight before peeing on the remnants. At first glance, I planned to run my errands and get out. The place teemed with holidaymakers, and it catered to their whims. Tacky shops lined the main thoroughfare, selling overpriced T-shirts and Ben & Jerry's. Polished cars preened themselves along the street between periods of gridlock as I negotiated the crowded sidewalk. The supermarket lay out of town, so I settled for Walgreens' meagre supplies. No fresh food, a limited display of undesirable boxed goods and uninspiring dinners. The saving grace was the NOC store, where I replaced my sleeping mattress. Their shuttle returned us to Newfound Gap, where I ran to the solitude of the woods. I hiked fast and past Bowser, who tried staying with me, but needing to reach Peck's Corner shelter before sunset, I outpaced him. I covered the 11 miles in 3 hours, blaming the psychological damage from Gatlinburg. Hikers filled the shelter, so I pitched my tent whilst chatting to Farnsworth, who took his choice of a trail name seriously. He wanted a longer, posher-sounding title. I scratched my head. Us English have a few high-class names. He smirked. Such as? Horatio? Rupert? Archibald? Or Bartholomew, perhaps? Nice, they're great, Fozzie. I continued. Did you know in England you can buy a lordship? His curiosity sparked. Seriously? Yeah, but don't quote me. I read it somewhere. He raised his eyebrows and scratched a cheek. I'm going with Lord Horatio Farnsworth for now. Thanks, Fozzie. Apricot-flavoured oats formed my main food source after Gatlinburg's disappointing resupply, and I hated them already. Gagging on the apricot variety over breakfast, I opened my pack and saw a curled-up mouse inside. He yawned, rubbed his eyes casually, and climbed out to search for food. The trail settled at 5,500 feet for several miles, and I stopped at Tricorner Knob Shelter for lunch. As I bemoaned my lack of dinner supplies, Walking Man and his nephew, Ninja Turtle, handed me a generous bag of homemade dried chicken and vegetable casserole. Along with 2 packs of beef ramen left in the shelter, my stomach quit complaining. The trail will provide. The crowded Cosby Knob shelter forced me to look for another place to sleep. Despite my chilly night at Clingman's Dome, the Mount Camera lookout tower appeared more promising. Built in 1937 by the Civilian Conservation Corps, a fire ranger manned it until the 1960s. Philip and PJ agreed with my proposal. With a luxurious wooden floor, a roof and enclosed sides, it sported several windows. Trail life simplifies our expectations of contentment. Forget whining about an unreliable car or weak coffee. We appreciated the simplicity of sleeping under a roof with walls and windows. Mary Poppins, so named because of his umbrella, sprung through the door and bulked my food supplies further, offering a prized avocado. I offered a pack of beef ramen as incentive to further bartering, but, unsurprisingly, he declined. With constant grim news on the weather front, the preference for shelters and other buildings intensified. We'd been lucky, remaining dry, save an occasional shower, but upon arriving at Standing Bear Hostel, the elements finally caught us. The place was busy, understandably, the sound of rain on the roof growing until the Appalachian hills sulked under a constant heavy deluge. We were thankful for the shelter. I cooked breakfast that morning. The downpour continued, so I figured hot food might please Philip, Daffy and PJ. Taking hiker appetites into consideration, I calculated 24 eggs, a high stack of bacon and several large potatoes would curb their cravings. Thank goodness the hostel shop had ample food stocks. They devoured it with much finger-licking and approving nods. Rain fell mercilessly the next day. We often sat out in clement weather, hoping it wouldn't last. Philip and I stared at our soaked environment from under an overhanging roof and discussed the obvious options. Either go or stay. Remaining stationary wastes time. The issue with leaving is, well, you get wet. We looked at each other and, shrugging our shoulders, hoisted our packs and raised our umbrellas. It's unpleasant starting out in rain, but waterproof gear is efficient these days, and once you're warm, it's a novelty. Slick mud and damp leaves didn't help the steep route from Standing Bear Hostel. We brushed against wet bushes and contorted our bodies around poison ivy. We warmed on the 5-mile, 2,500-foot climb onto the lovely Snowbird Mountain. Max Patch Bald shared similarities with the English hills where I grew up, played as a kid and hiked now. A low-hanging cloud compounded the familiarity, and we squinted under a hazy sky. The rain stopped, but our feet stayed damp in the wet grass. I counted 12 hikers inside Roaring Fork Shelter, and another 5 making space underneath it. Philip extolled the virtues of his new hammock as I tried again to fit my tent onto a platform. I crawled in, lowered the storm flap and hung my gear to dry. I couldn't get out. The flap release lay beyond my reach. Trapped, I peered under and saw Bridget. I cupped to my mouth. "Hey, help!" She stopped, cocked an ear and searched aimlessly. "Over here," I implored. She crouched to peer into my tent. "What's up? What you doing?" "Look, don't take the piss, but I can't get out. I'm stuck." She giggled, released me, and I was a free man again. Rain pounded North Carolina overnight. Unable to sleep, I left at 6 a.m. Philip called me mid-morning as we summited Bluff Mountain and descended 3,500 feet, emerging at Hot Springs. We forfeited our errands in favour of the Smoky Mountain Diner, conveniently the first stop. We ate enthusiastically, wild animals tearing at steaks between forkfuls of vegetables and gravy, our plates wiped clean with bread rolls. We secured a 4-berth cabin at Hot Springs Resort and Spa, expecting Daffy and PJ's arrival. The bench outside the laundrette offered an excellent perch to watch the world go by as my clothes dried. "Are you Fozzie?" I looked at a guy sporting an impressive beard accompanied by a young girl. "I am. Hi." "I'm Balls. This is my daughter, Sunshine. I bought your PCT book." I stood and shook his hands. "Thanks." I'd heard of Balls and Sunshine, so needed no introductions. "You two are attempting the Triple Crown, right?" Sure are. It's going well. Sunshine peered around her dad and said hi, all freckles, red hair and big smiles. Even at day's end, she wanted to walk further. I relayed the conversation to PJ later. He'd also bumped into them and heard Sunshine say, "Come on, Dad, let's do a 25. We spent a day in Hot Springs. I liked its compactness and the amenities lined the main street. Red brick buildings flanked the railway line, a short walk from our cabin next to the imposing French Broad River. Away from the mountains, the trees had sprung to life. I sat on warm boulders, soothing my feet in the calm water. Children screamed and played as barbecuing meat made my mouth water. I collected my new water filter, poncho and power pack from the post office and used the library's Wi-Fi to update my blog. Krista did the same as we discussed our progress. She was due in Japan for work, so I only had limited time on the AT. Her mother had returned home after a week's hiking with her. She was the focus of many male hikers' attentions. Undeniably attractive and initially reserved because of the intention, we'd bumped into each other several times and she'd opened up. Her trail name was now Pork Chop, after she packed out an impressive amount of meat to the trail. She dealt with the guys nonchalantly, often ignoring them. I joked she hiked with a blithe disregard for them. Many left in her wake in varying states of love-struck despair. The community centre offered an AYCE, or you can eat, in the evening. Tables lined the room, and pasta, garlic bread and salads disappeared quicker than the staff could replace them. Chatter was minimal as hikers focused on fueling. Bridget was now lady forward, and I was eager for her explanation. How come? Well, forward is the motto of the statue on the Madison Capitol building. As I'm a lady who's moving forward for 2,000 miles, it seemed appropriate. PJ scrutinised his guidebook whilst shoveling pasta into his mouth. We've done 274 miles, he announced, without emotion. Undecided if he was impressed or disappointed, I consoled him. It's progress, mate. Don't look at the bigger picture too much. The AT map produced by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy often reminded us of that bigger picture. I saw it in restaurants, libraries and other establishments, but ignored it because it was daunting. I checked it at the Smoky Mountain Diner with Philip, who declared we'd hiked the width of his little finger. After 3 weeks, we'd completed just 12%. I'd learned on other hikes to ignore the mileage remaining because slow progress played psychological games. I focused on each week, breaking them into days, split again into hours. I rested every 6 to 9 miles, repeated, ate lunch and did the same in the afternoon. Slowly, the target reeled in. Rain fell again, the temperature slumped, and I worried about the cold at higher elevations. Hot Springs sat at 1,332 feet, and it cooled as I climbed with PJ and Lady forward. After 11 miles at Spring Mountain Shelter, the skies cleared. Sodden gear hung from the rafters as hikers blew into cupped hands, pulled on extra layers and stomped their feet for warmth. I pitched my tent and fell asleep. After great conditions, we'd become complacent. We played a guessing game with the weather over the ensuing days. It was winter's end and spring's beginning. Dry, wet, hot, cold. We accepted the randomness. I rested at the little laurel shelter, chatting to Earthling as she huddled in the corner out of the wind. Pops arrived and we discussed how the weather had turned. Even stopping to rest was difficult because our body heat drained. I caught PJ on the slog to Big Fire Scald Knob before descending to our day's destination at the Jerry Cabin Shelter. The temperature nosedived as the rain, undecided, changed to sleet. It soaked us, leaching through our waterproofs and into our bones. Despite my gloves, my hands numbed. I couldn't get warm, even with hard hiking. The shelter appeared through the gloom as mist engulfed us. A weak wisp of smoke rose from the chimney, and a blue tarpaulin covered the shelter front. I entered and struggled to see in the murkiness. Several hikers wrapped themselves in sleeping bags or sat by the fire rubbing their hands. The place was full. A meagre pile of wet firewood promised little, and after trying to wriggle nearer the heat, I retreated outside to camp. My lifeless fingers fumbled with the guy lines, and the pegs struggled to anchor in the sodden soil. I inflated my mat and climbed inside my sleeping bag as my body reciprocated with tinges of warmth. Rain continued hammering on the tent as I cooked a warming meal before darkness forced me to sleep. I didn't battle it. The temperature dropped further overnight, and I woke to a world of white. I peered out at tents coated with snow. My shoes had frozen, my waterproofs were stiffened with ice, and I drank slushy water from my bottle. I placed my socks in my underwear to defrost them, an unpleasant experience after 3 days without washing them. I jumped over icy puddles and followed frosty footprints to Devil's Fork Gap, which shivered under the snow line. The rain stopped, but the sun continued battling, and gauging the weather was a constant puzzle. I repeatedly changed my layers to keep a stable temperature. In no time I'd gone from the warmth of hot springs to midwinter. The elevation had fluctuated, cold up high, bearable in the gaps, but pure confusion anywhere else. It played mind games. Coupled with the dense woods, my mood slumped, and although I couldn't change the weather, I longed for a board where space and light might compensate. Occasionally, the trail obliged. Once in my sleeping bag, I warmed for the first time each day. I left the tent flaps open for the wonderful views to the distant mountains. Hikers rarely saw the landscape, so boards offered escapes from the woods. I often rested there, mesmerized by oceans of trees. In the evening's subtle, fading light, those distant hills overlapped to infinity and shone blue. Gentle azure waves merged into the sky as I wondered if someone on a distant hill pondered similar thoughts. I balanced on rock perches, counterbalanced with outstretched arms, and lost touch with my feet, mesmerized and detached. Leaving the ground, I floated, gliding without sensation, just balancing on blue.